Guild's concert that we are having here. And we have 4 great tellers, including myself. And we just kind of want to share with you a little bit about who we are as a storytelling guild coming from the state of New Mexico. And one of the things that I really have pushed for, talking to both Tejas and also the Storytellers of New Mexico, I kept telling the people here in Texas, we have, our neighboring states has some fantastic storytellers. And I'm going to work really hard to get them to agree with me on being a part of a guild with the organization, because I want them to be able to be heard and seen by everyone here in Texas, because I think Texas educates the storytellers if they want to become professional or just better storytellers. And so in the classroom or whatever businesses they're a part of, and that's one of the things that I gained when I first came on so many years ago. And so to kick it off, I want to let you know why I have an interest in the storytelling in New Mexico. I grew up in the Pueblo of Laguna, right outside of Albuquerque, and then my father's people came from Arizona, from the Tewa and Hopi Reservation. And so Albuquerque, that area is always dear to my heart. I truly believe that the state of New Mexico, no matter which direction you go to, no matter what corner you go to, you will be enchanted, not only by the landscape, but by the people and the stories and the different cultures that all are held in the arms of New Mexico. And so I go back there often, and I was really happy to see that the storytelling organization was continuing on, because I knew about it at the beginning of my time as a storyteller. And then it kind of took a little break there for a minute, but then a wonderful group picked it up, and they've been kind of like sending it off into the skies since then. And you do know that Roswell is known for their aliens, but I personally, I hope I don't ever get to see them. I know some of you hope you can see some. I've seen, some of my family members that we kind of consider being aliens and stuff like that, because they look kind of weird. But one of the things about New Mexico, and it doesn't matter what culture it is, they just have a wonderful, there's just something in them that is also enchanting. They love to have fun, they love to explore, and the cuisine there is unbelievable. So yeah, that's something that you guys need to experience. A little bit about New Mexico, and I first want to let you know that there in New Mexico they have the 19 pueblos. You don't have, except Arizona has the Hopi Pueblo, and that's it. All the other pueblos are right there in the heart of New Mexico, right along the Rio Grande River. We also have 3 Apache tribes that are there. The Fort Sill Apache, the Jicarilla, and the Mescalero Apache. Also, the Navajo Nation is a part of the kind of the northwestern corner of New Mexico, all the way, almost like halfway of the state, kind of south of I-40. And then, of course, the Navajo Nation goes into Colorado, Utah, and Arizona. So they have a lot of land in the place area. And so that's a little bit about just kind of a taste of New Mexico. And so when I come back up, I'll give you some more information about New Mexico, so don't worry about that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. There is something in New Mexico that I love, and one of the things that it's hard to find every now and then are horned toads. Now, whenever I first saw a horned toad, it fascinated me. I loved picking up things until I got to the age to realize what was inside of them, and then I was not so happy to hold on to them, but I loved the horned toads. And I loved the spikes around them, and sometimes I would turn them around and look at them until my relatives would say, "Don't do that." And I said, "Why?" They said, "Because they have these little holes in their eyes, and they will like throw blood at you." I said, "What?" And they said, yeah, that's their protection against their enemies. And so I thought, oh, and so I made sure that I never really pointed any of them towards my face. And so when I came across this story, I loved this story. And so this is a retelling of a story about Coyote and Horned-Toad Lady. In the country of the land of enchantment, there are desert creatures. And one of my favorite ones is what we call horned toads. Now in this story, because I come from the pottery people, my horned toad lady is sitting right beside a lake. At Laguna, we have a lake that kind of dries up, but when we get the big rains, it fills up again. But traditionally, it is called Old Lady Lake. And so that was where my horned toad lady was sitting this day. And there she was on the edge, getting her clay and molding her pots. Now the horned toads are just like us as potters that are women. We sing songs to help that wonderful art that we do with our hands just kind of to go a little bit easier, and it kind of gives us our imagination and creativity. And so Horned Toad Lady was also singing a beautiful pottery song. And as that gentle breeze was coming across the air, it just kind of went right past her and it flowed on down. Little did she know that Coyote was along that path. And he happened to hear her singing, and it was wonderful, it was beautiful. One thing to know about Coyote is that he loved to collect stories. And whenever he would see the birds playing games, he wanted to learn those too. But the stories were the best. And so he just kind of stood still for a moment and just listened to her singing her song until it was over. And then he thought to himself, I think I'm going to go over to Horned Toad Lady and ask her if I can have that story and add to my collection. And so he went over to where Horned Toad Lady was, and she saw him coming, and she thought if she didn't look at him and ignore him, that maybe he would go away. But he kept on coming. And so as she was molding her pot, she began to hum instead of sing. Coyote stood there for a while, and then he finally said, Horned Toad Lady, do you not see me standing here? Are you not going to greet me? Oh yes, Coyote, I know you're there. What do you want? He says, what do you mean, what do I want? Oh, Coyote, we know you. You always want something. And so he said, well, now that you say that, I heard you singing, and you know I collect songs of the desert creatures, and that was a beautiful song. Can I have it? Will you sing it to me so I can learn it? And she said, no, Coyote, this is Horned Toad Lady's pottery songs. You're not a horned toad, and you don't make pottery, and so I cannot give you this song. Well, if you don't give it to me, I'm afraid I will have to eat you up, and nobody will get to hear your song again. She had to think about this, so she laid her pot down, and she said, okay, Coyote, come here. Sit down. Pay attention. I will sing this song to you twice. Listen very carefully, because I'm not going to give it to you again after that. And so Coyote sat down, and he closed his eyes, and as she was singing that beautiful song, he was taking it in, nodding in his head, trying to see the song that she was singing so he could hold on to it. And then she was finished. She said, okay, repeat it back to me. And he sat there, and he kind of waited for a moment, and then he began to sing it. She was so excited. She said, Coyote, you learned it in just 2 tries. That's good. Now, go on your way so I can finish up making my pottery. So Coyote, he said, okay, thank you, and then he took off. And he was going, and he was repeating that song over and over, singing it. He was so proud of himself for learning it so quickly. But he didn't realize that the bushes that he was getting ready to come to were housing birds. And they saw Coyote coming, and they were scared. But they knew if we can just be still, he might not even notice us. Because Coyote liked to play with the birds, and sometimes he would hurt them. And so they just tried to stay so still. But the little ones, they were so scared that they couldn't stand it any longer. When he got close to them, they just flew up in front of him and startled him. And all of a sudden, he let out the biggest howl. And then after he had finished, he thought about it, and he thought, oh no, oh no. And he started to try to think about the songs that he was singing, and it was just not coming back. And he thought, oh, those birds, they made me lose the song. And then he thought, oh. And he looked back at Horn-Toed Lady, and she was just molding her clay and not looking at him. Well, he made his way back to her, and he said, now Coyote, or Horn-Toed Lady, I know you said that you were not going to sing me that song again if I lost it. But, you know, I didn't know that the birds were going to be hiding in the bushes, and they just flew up right in front of me and scared me, and they just scared the song right out of me. Do you think maybe you could go ahead and sing it to me one more time? And she said, no, Coyote, I'm sorry. You won't be able to get it again. He got so mad, and he said, well then, no one else will hear that song again. And he reached down and grabbed her and swallowed her whole, all the way down his belly. And when she landed in there, she tried to get herself very, very comfortable. And that's when he started to feel his stomach aching. And then that made him aware of, oh no, oh Coyote, you do this all the time. You're so impatient. If you would have just asked her nice and waited, then maybe she would have given you that song again. But no, you had to just swallow her whole. And he said, I wish I had another chance to ask for that song. I wish Horn-Toed Lady was here so she could sing me that song once again. And then all of a sudden, there she was. Because among a lot of Pueblo people, she is known as Thunder Knives because of the spikes around her body. And as she landed on the ground in front of Coyote, she said, Coyote, I heard your wish, and here I am. I'll sing you that song one more time. And then when she turned around, she realized that was never going to happen. Because Coyote, he got what he wished for, but it cost him more than he thought. And that's the end of that story. Thank you. Now, I want to thank a few people, the Texas Folklore Society, the National Endowment of the Arts, and the Texas Commission on the Arts. They help fund a lot of the events that are taking place. But I really want to, especially if you ever see Valerie Kimball out there, because she's there, go tell her thank you, because not very many people love to write grants and really know how to do it. And Valerie, I don't know if she loves doing it, but she does a great job. She finds grants that are out there that nobody else knows, and she gets everything together to put together for the grants to be applied for and everything. And just the way she does it, she knows exactly what they're looking for. And a lot of times the grants that she applies for, whoever it is, Territory Tellers or Tejas, they get the grants. So if you see Valerie Kimball, tell her thank you. The next teller that we're going to have up here is Diane Rosbach. I had asked some of the storytellers, give me some information about, a little bit about you and where you came from if you didn't grow up in New Mexico, and why you stay and what do you like about New Mexico. And so Diane, she said that she was there because she was she came to New Mexico as an Air Force wife. And she lived in New Mexico. She's been living in New Mexico for 50 years. And I must say that during that time, Diane has jumped into all kinds of events with both feet. And so she does a lot more than just work for the Storytellers of New Mexico as a helper, as a teller, and everything. She discovered storytelling at a story swap at Brenda's house. Yes, and so that's how she connected. Brenda had a cafe in the 1990s, and she would always do celebrations at her cafe. And so Diane, that's where she became introduced to the storytelling world, and then the rest is history. One of the things that she thought that was fun, and she found that storytelling was fun and challenging. And when I asked her what some of the favorite things she liked, she said that there's so much to learn and so many layers of cultural understandings and so many stories. But she also said she was just enchanted by the outdoor sports, open skies, history, landscape, and the chili. And so welcome, Diane.
Awesome job there, Eldrina. Thank you, thank you. And sitting over here, I had no idea. The chairs, so many chairs are filled. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate having such a gorgeous audience. Terrific. Folk tales, right? Listening to Job and Izzy and his stories, analysis of luck versus wisdom. Maybe we'll talk about that just a little bit here. The folk tales have come down from generation to generation, and you don't want me to keep repeating the word as long as the amount of time that they have come down. They've done that because families shared them, friends shared them, they cared about them. These were their cultural gifts to their progeny. Holy mackerel. And sometimes they're kind of funny. So that's my cue to begin. In 1989, there was a gentleman named Ed Young who translated an ancient Chinese folk tale. But he changed it to a picture book. So not very many words in there, but the story was there. Here's my version so you can hear it. You can hear it. Imagine, if you will, a green, verdant, beautiful hillside in China, and it's just the leaves are grown and the plants and the flowers, and it's tucked right down at the bottom is a small, but looking kind of happy and charming home, just a small home. Inside it, there is a mother and 3 daughters. Shum, Tao, and little Potsy. She's kind of energetic. We'll try to keep track of her. All a buzz with activity this morning inside that home. They're all helping their mother to pack, because it's their grandmother's birthday, and mother wants to take gifts and food and things down the path through the forest to grandmother's house. They are helping and folding and stuffing and whatnot. Oh, it's all in her pack, mother's pack, and finally she has to say goodbye. And she offers her 3 daughters, Shun, Tao, and Potsy, words of love and warning. She says, be good to each other. Take care of each other while I'm gone. I can't be back tonight. The footpath is too long. You can't come with me. I will be back tomorrow. So take care of each other. Be sure to close the door and latch the lock when it gets dark. Okay, the girls are all okay with that? Is this is all working. And she hefts the pack onto her back, and sure enough, she goes down the path, through the forest, to grandmother's house. Now, they didn't know that just across the path, on the other side, kind of tucked into the bushes, there's a she-wolf, a gray she-wolf. And she is hungry. She's watching. Oh, my. And because she's so crafty, she's putting together a plan to return at dusk. Return to the house. Well, in the meantime, the girls finish their chores. They take care of this and that. They make sure the garden is watered. They have everything is done. Finally, the day comes to a close. And sure enough, they close the door and they latch the lock. But not much time elapses before kind of a knock at the door, and that is such a surprising thing to Shum. She says, Who is it? My jewels. It is your Popo. Now, the Chinese would say Popo. We might say grandmother. This is grandmother Wolf. Oh, my jewels, you are here. Hello, would you open the door? Well, Shum, so surprised. Who is it? Now she asks, why is your voice so low? I have a cold. Excuse me. But it is cold out here and it is windy. Why are you here so late? My mother went down that path just this morning to visit you. Well, I haven't seen, she must have taken a different path. And the path is long, the day is short. Could you open the door, dearies? Would you open the door? Well, at this point, my goodness, She-Wolf can hear that there's scuffling and kind of fidgeting, there's noise behind the door, because Tao and Potsy want to give their grandmother a hug. They want to open it. Oh, and they just push that door open, unlatch the latch, push the door open, and just as that happens, the wolf blows out the candle. Po, why did you blow out the candle? There wasn't any answer this time. But Tao and Patsy rushing in for hugs and, oh, my little Tao, you have grown very sweet. And Patsy got another hug. Oh, Dave, you smell so good, tender. I'm really tired now. I think we should all go to bed. And so Grandmother Wolf is inside and hops into the great big bed. Well, Potsy immediately jumps in on one side, leaving Tao and Shum to the other side. They're all inside, and the She-Wolf, the Popo, it pulls the bedding up over her nose. Over her nose, you can hardly see her. And then stretching out in the bed. Sean. Oh, Po, Po. She touches the tail of the wolf. Po, Po, there's a bush. Did you fall? There's a bush on your foot. What is that? Now, dearie, don't worry. I brought some hemp, and we're going to weave some baskets. We'll weave baskets for your mother. Oh, okay. Trying to settle herself again, Sean reached out a little bit and, Po, there are thorns in your hand. You have thorns. No, don't worry. I brought an awl so that I could make shoes for you in the morning. For all three of you, it's that you need new shoes. So Sean, the eldest, the cleverest, kind of started to turn. She wanted to relight that candle. And as she did, gosh, she-wolf blew it out again. But not before Sean saw those deep golden eyes and teeth. Oh, long teeth. Whiskers. Bobo, you must be hungry. You took this long journey. You must be hungry. There's a ginkgo tree. It's right by the front door. Have you ever had ginkgo nuts? Ginkgo, I don't know anything about ginkgo. They're out in the tree. They grow right up kind of close to the top of the tree. They're sweet and soft, tender as a baby's skin. And if you eat one, you'll live forever. Oh, well, now she sort of had the she-wolf's attention at this point. But she-wolf said, I am old. My bones are brittle. I can't climb trees anymore. I can. And Shum said, we all will. Grabbed Towel and Potsy, the three of them, out the front door, over to the tree. And she told them what indeed she had seen just before that candle had been blown out again. So the three of them climbed the tree. Wolf stayed inside because she-wolf was kind of thinking about that immortality thing and was really concentrating on that might be fun. That might be a good way to go. But she found that the children didn't come back directly inside and bring her anything to eat. Where are you? We're out in the tree. We're in the tree. Oh, these nuts are so good. And so she came out. Throw one down for me. Oh no, you know that actually the magic of the ginkgo nut, that only happens if you pick them yourself. Tell you what, I have a plan. There's a basket just by the door. There's rope right beside the basket. Go ahead and bring the basket up, tie the rope to the top, climb inside, throw the free end up. I will catch it, and I'll pull you up into the tree. Okay. Sean was so convincing. The she-wolf did everything exactly as she had been instructed. Sean caught the rope and pulled and pulled and pulled. The the basket with the wolf inside, climbed higher and higher in the tree. It wasn't quite a halfway mark, and the rope slipped from her hands. Boom. Wolf tumbled down to the ground again. They could hear the bruises must have felt. And Sean called out, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so weak, I'm little. I couldn't hold you." Tal speaks up. "I will help. We'll both pull. We'll both pull. If you just get back in, throw that rope up to us, the two of us can pull." He did, she did, and they pulled up, hand over hand, and this time the basket rose faster. Almost, it came just past the halfway mark. Boom. The rope fell to the ground. It slipped from their hands. Oh no, I'm so sorry, Popo. Popo. What'll we do? Patsy calls out, "Hey, I can help." And so the three girls decide that they will be glad to pull that wolf up into the tree so that she can pick the ginkgo nuts herself. Wolf gets back in the basket, pulls, and they call out, "Hi-ya, hi-ya." They're just working so hard. As it gets past the midway mark, the wolf is able to reach out. Oh no, this is so close. Reaches out and kind of gets off balance and boom, tumbles the basket, hand over hand, head over paws, all the way down to the ground. Crash. And now there's no noise from the ground. Girls look at each other and decide they'll climb back down the tree a ways. What's there? And they convince themselves that they can see amid the brush and the broken branches, they can see the wolf. And so they come down farther and farther, and they get down to the last branch. Looking down, they can't see the wolf anymore. Not there. And so they believed that the wolf had a broken heart, must have traveled out. So they come down fully with their pockets filled with ginkgo nuts, go in the front door, close it, and latch the lock. In the morning, Mother returns. And she has presents and food from their real Popo. And the girls tell their mother the story of the long Popo, the grandmother wolf that came to visit them. And they tell that story to their own children and their children's children, and the story continues. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Diane. I appreciate that. Our next teller is Lucinda. And Lucinda, I don't want to tear your name up. And you have my permission to pronounce your last name because it's a beautiful last name. But when you come up, you can let them know because I always have the hardest time. And so a little bit about Lucinda. Lucinda when she was starting out, she had come to New Mexico to live
from the high Sierras in the northern part of California. Beautiful country. And one of the things that I have to tell her that I appreciate is that she had given my name to some of the organizers up there, and she allowed me to see the area that she lived at before she came down to New Mexico. But her first experiences with storytelling is when she came to New Mexico when the National Storytelling Network was called NAPS, or NAPPS, Congress. And she came down there in 1988 to Santa Fe, and while she was there, she just spent a lot of time walking around and learning about the area and studying history and allowing just herself just to kind of sink back into time, because it just gave her a special feeling to be there. And then she said she's always been a storyteller, and she's been telling stories for about 40 years now. And one of the things that she entered a certification in a storytelling program at the Dominican College in the Bay Area. And so she started after that going professionally into the storytelling world. And so one of the things that in talking about her, she made several trips to Jonesboro, and she learned from a lot of the masters, and so she just involved herself. She's held a lot of the festivals around the country, the Bay Area especially, and with the Sierra Storytelling Festival. And here coming up, she's going to be making her way back up there because she's on the board still, so they're going to gather together and get more information, and I'm probably sure with everybody that she's been hearing while she's here, it's probably some of those names are going to stay with her. So I'm really proud of that. One of the things that she said that she found out about the Storytellers of New Mexico, and she became a member and started to help out in different events. But one of the things that she does for STNM is online. She is a part of the Story Crafters, and if you're ever interested, go to our website and you can contact Lucinda, and she will send you an email link so that you too can get onto the Zoom, and she'll let you know the theme and when it's going to start. And so right now, I want to welcome a wonderful storyteller, Lucinda, and organizer and event planner that helped many storytellers. Thank you, Lucinda.
Thank you all, and thank you, Aldrina, for that welcome. My last name is Delormier, but don't worry about ever having to say it. There aren't many of us Lucindas. I've discovered. All right, am I heard in the back of the room?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Now, there are still places and cultures that where people will gather around a table and they will look into one another's eyes, and they will probably have hot coffee, and they will tell stories to one another. It still happens. This is a book. My story comes from the book More, Margarito and Me by David Calle. Can you tell I'm a librarian too? More, Margarito and Me is one of Dave Calle's books. David has lived in northern New Mexico for most of his life, and he has sat around those tables, and he has drunk coffee with, is it, thank you, that way. Oh, gracias. Okay, that's better. Dave has heard these stories, and he passes them along in his books. I highly recommend David Calle. I can help you find them if you want to talk after. At the villages from where the stories come from are in what historian Paul Horgan referred to as the dark mountain villages of the north. And this is a tale like that. The chapter in the book where the story comes from is called Lent. And here we are. It's this time of year. It's Lent. And it's spring, and this is when, it's an almost religious significance, the acequias are cleaned. The mayordomo chooses a day, everyone in the community who uses the water from that irrigation ditch, that acequia, gathers with their hose and they work to clean the ditch. It takes days sometimes, depending on how long the ditch that serves your community is. You have to keep it so the water is unimpeded. That's sustenance. That's for your livestock, for your crops, for you, the precious water. Well, two of the characters in the book are Ricardo, a young man, and Margarito, his dear friend, who's older. And when they're finished for the day, they're hungry, they're tired. Margarito invites Ricardo over for coffee. They go, they do some chores, get the sheep in the barn, they sit down, they have hot coffee, they've slapped together sandwiches of ham and whole fire-roasted green chilies, of course. And they were hungry and tired, and they sat and ate silently. But then Margarito sat back, and he said, I thought of something today. I don't know why I remembered it, but I thought of this thing that happened here long ago. It had to have been before 1910. I had maybe 6 or 7 years. And my parents would talk about it. I don't know why it came to me. Well, it came to me today because it's Lent. And I was thinking of La Quaresma, Lent. And I remembered this thing that happened to a man. I don't remember the man's name back then, but I do remember he had a fine horse. It was a bay gelding. That man loved that horse. He would ride that horse all around, and I would see him. Well, Lent was different in those days. Los Hermanos had more influence, and people really regarded it as a time of penance. They gave things up. Nobody drank alcohol or ate sweets. You could only eat meat on certain days. But there are always exceptions. There's always someone who breaks the rules. And it was that man who had the horse. That man's habit was to go out almost every night of the week and find a cantina and drink, and then he would go to the next cantina or a sala. He would spend the evening going from cantina to cantina, and by the time they all closed, he was pretty drunk. He could be miles from home, but that horse always got him home safely. There are some horses that will do that. Maybe they sidestep or something when their rider falls asleep. That horse was like that. Well, one night that man set out to go to the cantinas, and it was during Lent. He went to the closest cantina. He could see the door was open and the light was streaming out, but when he got there, the door was closed. No light, nobody. Hola? No one answered. Well, that was not a problem. He went to the next cantina a mile or so down the road, and he could hear music around the curve. He could hear a violin striking up a valse. Oh, yes, maybe there's a baile. That cantina is bigger. And he came around the curve, and the door was closed. All was silent. He dismounted. He went to the door. He pounded on the door. Abrir la puerta! Nothing. Well, he continued on, riding his horse from cantina to cantina, and every single one, though it looked as though it would be open, was closed and locked. Is someone playing a joke on me? He would gallop so that they would not close before he got there, arrive in a cloud of dust, and no lights, no music, locked door. He went on to Rio Pueblo, the village that had 2 or 3 cantinas. They seemed to be everywhere in those days. And finally on to Colorado. He went to every cantina he knew in that village, and there was one left. He rode his horse to that one, and the door was open, and the light streamed out. There was a lamp inside. He dismounted, tied his horse, went up and listened, because he could hear a woman crying inside. Well, he stepped into the cantina. There was no one there. It was one of the tiny one-room cantinas, but the voice was there. Who are you? Where are you? What has happened? Why do you cry? And the voice broke into heart-wrenching grief. My son, my dear son, they have killed my son. They have pierced his hands and feet and hung him on a cross. They have pierced his side with their cruel steel. Ay, Dios míos, my son. Well, that man was pretty scared. He got right out of there and he ran to his horse. He untied that horse, jumped on, and they galloped. And the horse lost no time either. He wanted to go away from there too. Headed toward home, out of the Colorado, down the road, at the fastest gallop that horse could do. Well, some miles went by, and at last he calmed down. He slowed his horse to a trot, and he realized it was late. The moon had risen. It had to be past midnight, so now it was Good Friday. Well, they went on, and they were pretty close to home. And the moon, the clouds had been coming over the moon and passing by, and the clouds passed, and the moon was shining brilliantly. They got to the bridge over the ditch, and there he could see in the moonlight a little boy sitting in the middle of the road with his back to him. Well, he didn't have to stop his horse. His horse stopped. His horse snorted. His horse was wanting to turn back to Old Colorado. And he sat his horse and watched. And in the moonlight, he could see the little boy was shooting marbles. The marbles glinted in the moonlight there in the dust of the road in front of the boy. Well, the man got off the horse. He held the reins. He stepped forward. The horse did not want to go. But he controlled his horse. He stepped to the boy. He looked down, he bent down to see the boy's face, but the boy turned aside. What are you doing, child? So far away from any houses in the middle of the night? No answer. Well, what is your name? Nothing. Who are your parents? Who is your family? No response. And then the man thought of his wife at home, pregnant with their first child. And he made a decision. Swiftly, he bent down, he scooped up the marbles, he put them into his pocket, he lifted the child, he swung into the saddle and settled the boy at his back, and he felt the boy's arms come around his waist to hold on. They started off. And the horse was in a nervous trot. On they went, and then the man thought, oh, this boy must be one of the Lopez's. They live in the house on the other side of the hill. We're almost there. I'll take that boy home. And he turned and said over his shoulder, are you one of the Lopez's? I'll take you home. Finally, the boy spoke. The boy said, Daddy, tengo cuernos. The man thought, what are you saying? You have horns? I don't think so. And to himself he thought, this child must be slow, or so frightened he's muttering nonsense. And they went on a little ways further, and the boy spoke again, Daddy, tengo cola. And I thought, no, I certainly didn't notice the tail nor horns for that matter. I need to get this boy home. It's a pretty sad thing, whatever's going on with him. And then the clouds covered the moon again, and they were in a deep darkness. And then the boy shrieked, Daddy! Daddy! and let go of his waist, and he slid back against the horse's flanks and was gone. The horse screamed in pain and reared, and suddenly there was an unbelievably blinding yellow flash of light, and a cloud of sulfur arose. The sulfur almost choked the man, and as the horse was rearing, the man fell back onto his back in the dirt. The horse kicked and ran over the hill. The man felt that he lay there for a long time. But he came to and he tried to look around, but he was still blinded from that flash of light. He struggled to his hands and knees and felt around. He was concerned for the boy. And the horse? No sign of either. And finally his sight began to return. He managed to get to his feet. He looked around. He could not find the boy. He began to walk home. Well, the moon came out again from behind the clouds, and he could see dark drops in the dust of the road ahead of him. He bent down and touched one and brought it up, and in the moonlight it looked like blood. The hair on the back of his neck rose, and he began to run, thinking as he ran, I had to have imagined all that. I had to have imagined the crying woman. I had to have imagined the boy. None of this could have happened. And then he was at his house. His house was up on a rise ahead of him. And by this time, in the east, you could see light behind the mountains. He could see his wife out in front of the house holding a kerosene lantern and cradling with her other hand their unborn child. And next to her was his brother and his nephew who lived close by. They were calling his name almost hysterically. He staggered up the hill and called out, I'm here, I'm all right. His wife went to him and, she saw him covered with dirt and blood. She nearly fainted. He caught her and they went inside. They sat at the table. What happened? Well, he told them about going to all the cantinas. Then he said, and after that, I must have had some dream. Some animal must have frightened my horse to make him rear and throw me, where is my horse? Oh, we have him in the corral. Go on. Well, I just don't know what happened. It must have been a nightmare. And he began telling them of that dream that he'd had. And he told them of the crying, invisible woman and what she said. And they shook their heads. And then he told them about the little boy when he got to the part of Daddy. Tengo cuernos. Their eyes got immensely large. And when he said the part about Daddy, tengo cola, their jaws dropped. And when he got to the part about Daddy, tengo uños, they sat back in their chairs, crossed themselves, and in unison, Madre de Dios. And then his wife said, your horse is bleeding. I thought it was your blood. I was so frightened. I ran to your brother's house to get him. He came with his rifle. I didn't know what to do. And his brother said, I thought it was your blood too, but then when I saw the gashes, the long claw marks on your horse's flanks, I thought you had been attacked by a lion. The man rose swiftly and ran from the house out to the corral, followed by his brother, his wife, and his nephew. And there he wiped at the blood on his horse's flanks. The horse shied and stood quivering. And the man thought, no, this cannot have happened. His legs became weak. He sank to his knees. Ay, Dios mío, it could not be. And then he remembered the marbles. He reached into his pocket. His face went white. slowly he pulled out and held there in his palm 5 blood-red marbles, the amount of wounds of Jesus as he hung on the cross. True picture of northern New Mexico.
Yes. Thank you, Lucinda.
You're
wonderful. Thank you so much. Just to kind of give you some information about New Mexico, it became, got its statehood on January 16th in 1912. And it became the 47th state, but something that I want you guys to kind of, a little bit more about the history. The capital, everybody says it's Santa Fe, but they don't know that before Santa Fe, it was one of the Pueblo tribes, Oke-Oinge, to the north. And then as it started to get more established, they brought it down and they created, wanted Santa Fe to be the capital. So that's for your information to put in your pocket. If they ever ask, you know, if this was true, you can tell them yes. Because the Oke-Oinge people are very proud to let people know that. And so our next storyteller is Gladys Morales. And I met Gladys, and when I heard her story, I was just blown away. I was part of Dusty Dean, who is sitting over here. He's our president, and he kind of gathers people together and allows them to record at one of the studios, and he kind of gets it all together and everything. And Gladys and I and 2 others were part of that videotaping, and so that's offered to the membership there in with STNM. And so when I was getting ready to tell my story, Gladys had gone up, and I was just sitting there going, wow, where did she come from? Because I have not seen or heard her. And then I finally got her story. But here's a little bit more about Gladys. She's the founder of Morales Speaks, a motivational storytelling platform dedicated to resilience, growth, and community empowerment. After losing her father to cancer as a preteen and later facing her own cancer diagnosis in 2018, resulting in further vision loss, Gladys chose to rise rather than to retreat. Through personal adversity and cultural identity, she discovered her voice and now empowers others to reclaim theirs. Her message blends vulnerability with strength, reminding audiences that even in life's darkest chapters, purpose can be reclaimed. She came to New Mexico in 2018, was introduced to storytelling and the Duke City Story Slam, and that propelled her to start speaking in public and sharing her stories. And when I asked her what she loves about New Mexico, she told me that I can still kind of see the images in front of me, but I don't really get to see the detail of what I'm looking at. I can look and see that there's a tree, but I don't know what kind of tree, and I can't see the leaves. I can see people and some of the colors that they might have, that I can kind of see the color of it that I remembered, but I don't see the detail. And so she said, one of my favorite things in being in New Mexico are the sunrises and the sunsets. The sunsets, she said, when I look at them, when it gets down to a certain point, I can see the color purple blending in with pink, and I just stare at that until it fades away. And so I want to introduce you to a wonderful woman by the name of Gladys Morales. Come on up, Gladys.
¿Qué haces, muchacha traviesa? What are you doing, troublesome child? ¿Qué no acaban de decir que no puede ver? Didn't they just say that she can't see? Well, truth be told, yes, I had just been declared legally blind. However, let me tell you, did not stop me from running around with my cousins, same age, 3 months apart. His younger brother, 3 years younger, my younger brother, 2 years younger, and the neighbor's boy, Giovanni to the right and Hector to the left. Well, as my grandmother would say, parecen caballos. You guys seem like wild horses. Because we would run across the schoolyard, over the fence, across the street, over our home fence, and into our yard when they would say, the Proctors are coming! And this constant voices that I heard of people trying to understand who or what I am. And I think part of what attributed to this was my father. Because as a firstborn male, it was his heart's desire to also have a firstborn male. Well, it turns out I kind of came out a girl. However, it does not stop him from dressing me up like a boy. So I am so grateful to my father for allowing me to embrace my masculine side as well as my feminine side. Because my family, we were brought up in the church, and I had to wear those fluffy dresses with those pretty black shoes and tidied up and ribbons in my hair and braids, and it just felt so constricting to me. So when we got home from that family get-together service or whatever the occasion was, I would tear off my clothes and I would say, I can finally take this off! And I would put on my tennis shoes, put on a pair of shorts, a t-shirt, and an oversized sweater, because there was nothing else like feeling freedom and running with the boys. The boys that I grew up with. Well, my cousins, not the neighbors. And it just felt so awesome. And as I continued to grow up, because I had to, it wasn't my choice, I realized, wow, it's so much fun to be a boy than to be a girl. But this got me into cross-country and track and field, which then led to receiving a scholarship by a religious affiliated university on a track scholarship. So as well as I was tomboyish growing up, I continued to be tomboyish as a young adult. You know, track pants, tennis shoes, t-shirts, all the works. And then we would have little small groups, right? Because you guys might be familiar. We get grouped up and everyone starts asking, oh, where did you transfer for? Where did you come from? And people would say, I'm from Montana. People would say, I'm from New York. And then people would say, well, I would say, I'm from Fontana. And some kids would say, Fontana? Where's that? And it made sense to me because people from out of state have no idea about the California Speedway in Fontana, which was my hometown. And then there were some students who would press a little further because they would say, well, okay, you're from Fontana, but where are you from? And I was like, well, I went to Kaiser High School, not Fontana High School, because there's a whole team rivalry there too. And then they'd be like, oh, okay. But one time, a friend of mine, and he bashfully said, okay, Gladys, I'm going to ask you straight up, where are you really from? Because you don't look like us. And that caught me by surprise. Because predominantly, I had been in communities that were Mexican-American, or just Mexican. And when he said this and brought this to my attention, I realized what he was really asking. He meant, where is my cultural background from? But I didn't know what to do that at that moment. Well, before we move further, let me take you a little bit back. Because we had gone to Mexico to visit my hometown. And my hometown happens to be Tepatlasco, Puebla. Tepatlasco stands for Rocky Land. And we were there playing and eating and having fun, and my grandmother decides to go to one of the markets. And so my cousin and I were outside, and all of a sudden I hear, "Oye, niña! Oye, niña! Hey! Hey, girl!" Well, clearly I don't respond to "hey, girl." But I realized he was addressing me. And so I turned around and said, "Oh, hi," in Spanish. And he says, hey, where are you from?" And again, I was like, what? Wait, I know I'm blind, but are we not the same color? Do you not have dark hair like I do? And dark eyes? And don't our features look similar or alike? But I'm sharing this only to say that this happens everywhere and anywhere I go. And even with people who are from Latin America, because they'll say, "Oh, where did you learn your Spanish from?" And I say, "At home." Because my aunt harped on us for speaking proper Spanish. She would say, "You girls need to speak right. Otherwise, people will think you're something else," which made no sense to me because, I was a kid. But as an adult, I understood because people often say, "Well, your Spanish doesn't sound like us." And they say, "You speak so eloquently," even in Spanish, I suppose. And it's just so funny to me as this question continues in every conversation. And I tell people, it literally goes from professional settings to social settings. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a salsa dancing event because, yes, I love to dance, and I love to dance salsa because we can hold hands, and I don't have to see the dance or feel the music. But I met these two guys who happened to be from Tepatlasco, Puebla. And I was so excited. And I said, "Oh my gosh, you're from there? I'm from there. We're like the same." And they too were like, "Really? You're from Tepa? But you don't sound like us." And it's just so incredible how often this question happens. And not just to me, but I can only imagine that perhaps sometime, at some point in your own life, you've experienced this too. Because we have this tendency of wanting to put people in boxes, of wanting to see, where do you belong? Are you a criminal? Are you a lawyer? Are you a vagrant? Are you someone who I can get something from? Because that's what my grandmother would say. Don't show people what you have because then they might want them. And it's just interesting, at least I think so now, that I'm a little bit more grown up and a little bit more understanding of the way we are as humans, that we want to put things in boxes. The thing is, I've never fit in a box. From being Mexican to being Mexican-American, from being told you don't belong here, but I feel like I belong here. And this reminds me of a Mexican character in Mexican film named La India Maria. Translation, the Indigenous Mary. And she has a popular hit where she says, "Ya no puedo aprender el inglés, y se me está olvidando el español. Ya ni soy si soy de aquí ni de allá." And she says, "I don't know if I can't remember Spanish because I'm starting to forget it, and I can't learn English. Now, I don't know if I belong here nor there." things that has also come into, yes, my light, my perspective, is that, well, why does it matter where I come from? Because am I not human like you? I tell people, don't we all bleed the same? Because I know when I bleed, and yes, I may be almost completely blind, but I'm pretty sure my blood is still red as is yours. But when these conversations continue and they're constant, and I feel like everyone, even my own people, literally from my own land, still say, where are you from? I've came to a realization and a decision, because yes, I am Mexican, and yes, I am Aztec descendants. And as a wise man told me, one doesn't cancel out the other. And I love wearing baggy jeans and oversized t-shirts. Actually, I think most of the story crafting events I've been to, I have been wearing sweats and sweaters. And I love being able to be who I am in the body that I am. And even this. Because there was a time in my life when I refused to use a cane. When I was a child, and when I was a teenager, and even when I was in college. But when 2018 came, and I was able to reach 2019, March of 2019, so it's such a, impressive month for me. I had the opportunity to walk out of the hospital. And I realized that I couldn't see as much as I could before surgery and chemo treatments. But I knew that I could use a cane. And I remembered myself when I said, I will never use a cane. I don't want people to know that I'm blind, because I could be hurt. Well, now I know that if I don't use a cane, I could get hurt. Much more. But I have finally been able to embrace myself as I am, as a first-generation Mexican-American who also speaks Spanish, but then also recognizes that it's not the original language of my people. Because my family is from Aztec descendants, and both of my grandparents speak Nahuatl. I didn't fully learn it myself, but I'm working on it. Because just as I thought that I would never use a cane, I realized to embrace myself, damage and all, scars and all, is also to embrace humanity and accept others as they come. And so today, when people ask, out of curiosity, or when I realize, out of, you don't belong here, I say, oh, where am I from? My mother's womb. Thank you.
Okay. Our last presenter. And Dusty, I may need your help here because we're going to have to make some adjustments. I think this is fine, but when she goes to sit down, we'll go ahead and adjust that. Just to finish up a little bit about New Mexico. I think I need to do this for myself. There we go. Thanks. We know that the capital is Santa Fe. The slogan is the land of enchantment. And then also the bird, which is very precious to me because I come from the Roadrunner clan, and we call the Roadrunner Shashkahanuk, and so that is the state bird, and the flower is the yucca flower, and the flag is has a red sun symbol that comes from the Zia tribe, and it's up against the yellow, which represents kind of like the fields of gold. And it was adopted, the flag was adopted in 1925. And so with a little bit of information about the state of New Mexico, I just want to also let you know that you're always welcome to come. There's always wonderful things happening in New Mexico. As a matter of fact, next week I'll be heading back to the Pueblo of Laguna because we will start our planting season, and we will have our first feast day on March 19th, and so I will go back home for that. And I also want to make sure, you heard me say that we want to acknowledge our sponsors. Once again, the Texas Folklore Society, the National Endowment of the Arts, the Texas Commission on the Arts, of course the Tejas Storytelling Organization, Michael Grundy, and he has been wonderful for the organization, and Tim Couch, and also JB and Judy Keith have been some wonderful sponsors for the festival, along with many others, and you'll find them in the brochure. Don't forget to see the gift shop, go by there, and then also, if you need something to drink and eat, go ahead and get you some snacks while when you go back. Our next teller is Brenda Hollingsworth Marley. She moved to New Mexico back in 1991. She had visited New Mexico prior to moving there because she had attended an environmental event that was taking place. And while she was there, she kind of thought, you know, this might be a nice place to be, but it really is too hot for me because she was coming from California. And so years went by, and then all of a sudden she thought, you know, we kind of have to, I want to moved my family away from California for a while, and she kind of started investigating the different states that she might want to go to, and as she looked into them, she kind of landed on the state that she said was too hot, and that was New Mexico. And so she has been back there for a very long time. She was introduced to storytelling when she got there, and she went to work at the main library in Albuquerque, and a fellow librarian got her involved in the children's area and reading to the kids, and then she realized that, oh, I really like this. And so that librarian kind of encouraged her to start telling stories, and she did a funny thing. She started to call them, when they told stories together, Ebony and Ivory. And so kind of used that along the way. So you can talk to Brenda a little bit about that. And so she had kind of encouraged Brenda to go ahead and explore the freedom within a story. And that's kind of what came out from all of this. And so since then, she became a part of, kind of like, I guess I would call it an ambassador for the New Mexico Humanities Council, and she has been doing that for 29 years. So she has gone throughout the whole state, in every corner, meeting all kinds of people and experiencing cultures and the land, and there were many times she said she was driving on that road all by herself. And when I asked what she loved about New Mexico, she said, I love the open skies, the smell of roasting green chilies, and Christmas. Help me welcome Brenda.
Good afternoon. I want to give honor to the land on which I stand. I came to know this land as Turtle Island. So I want to give thanks for the people who have walked this land and given us so many blessings as a result of many sacrifices. I want to give honor to my mother. My mother's name was Bessie Garner. She became Bessie Garner Hollingsworth. And she was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi, or thereabouts. Now, my mother was born in 1916, and she, as a little girl, was actually told by her father, who was a sharecropper, that education was not important. She needed to go and pick cotton with the rest of her siblings. And so, by 3rd grade, my mother was pushed into managing land. Her little brother, her mother died when she was 8. And it was a tough life. Little Bessie learned to shoot a gun by the time she was 10 years old. You never would have thought that she would be able to do such a thing, but she was able to do it. So she cared for the land and her brothers and learned how to cook outside over the coals. And as Bessie grew up, well, she met my father. He was a donor of DNA. I never really met the man, but his name was Lawrence Marley. And my mother had 5 other children. I'm the youngest of 6. And so, as my father got more ensconced in her life, it was pretty amazing because he had become a Pullman porter on the railroad. And Mr. Pullman saw a pool of African-American men that needed work. And so my father wanted a respectable job. He had to work long hours, traveling the rails. And so he would travel from Vicksburg, Mississippi, by the old Mississippi River, all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah, Ogden, Utah, Logan, Utah. That was his run. Now, my father liked women named Bessie. He had a couple of them. He had a couple of them while he had my mom. I don't know what that name meant to him, but Bessie was it for him. Woo-wee! So, Bessie became pregnant with me. And he, having discovered Utah, said to my mother, you know, Bessie, it would be a wise thing, don't you think, if you just packed up all your children and headed west to the gateway of Utah. Well, there had been so many lynchings in Mississippi, and in 1927 there was a flood, and African-American folks were digging white folks out of mud and placed into tents, sometimes against their will. And it was difficult being in Mississippi. My mother thought about it, and she agreed. Now she packed a basket full of goodies. I don't know how many of you like to eat. Hopefully all of you. And so she packed some biscuits. She packed some sweet potato pie. She packed some potato salad and some deviled eggs and some southern fried chicken. Now I know you don't know anything about that. But she packed up that basket and her 3 little girls with bows in their hair and little pigtails. That's what we called them back then. And back then they wouldn't say mother dear or mother dearest. Because they were Southern, they say mud dear. And she took them with my brother, who was 18 months older than me. And off they went to the gateway of Utah. Now growing up there, I used to hang out in different places. And I tell you what, when I visit my mother's not boyfriend in Salt Lake City, and you'll have to ask me about what a not boyfriend is later, but, well, I would lie in that bed, and my brother and I, in twin beds, would listen to the sound of the rails. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Ooh, and the sound of a train whistle. That was when I began to feel the spirit of the trains and the rails. I also enjoyed the fact that, well, because of this man that I was related to, my mother moved from Mississippi to Utah because he was a Pullman porter on that railroad. Also, when I was a little girl, my mother, Bessie, used to take me visiting to Oakland, California, to the area by the bay. And I'd visit my favorite uncle, my Uncle Lee. And we traveled on Amtrak, was different than the Santa Fe Railroad. And I remember going to the restroom and seeing a woman there breastfeeding, and I covered my eyes and I wanted to run out of the bathroom. She said, no, it's okay. She let me know it was all right, and later I would breastfeed 5 children. Being on the rails was very impactful for me. And I have a grandson named Jalen, who is 4 years old, that absolutely loves everything about trains. And so being here in Denton has been quite heartwarming, because as I'm staying in an Airbnb, I've been listening every day to the sound of a train whistle going by. And I said, it fits right in with the story that I'm going to be telling today. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation came to be on April 9th of 1865. Old Abraham Lincoln, why he freed the slaves. But when he freed the slaves, there was a time, a period called Reconstruction, where African Americans were able to elevate themselves out of some of their economic depression, you see. They were able to find more social status and move into the political realm. There were 2,000 African American men who were able to take seats within the politics of the land. And little towns began to blossom. There was Rosewood, and there was Greenwood, or that street in Tulsa. But then there came something in about 1877, and it was called the Compromise of 1877. And what happened was the vibration of the land began to change. There was a shift, and you could feel it happening. And African Americans weren't as able to do the things they once were able to do to try to rise up from their legacy of slavery in America. And so people began to be pushed out. Rosewood, there was violence and night riders and the KKK, otherwise known as the Ku Klux Klan. And Tulsa, why there were over 300 people murdered and people pushed out of that land. Over 35 square blocks flattened. There were doctors' offices and hospitals and bowling alleys and all kinds of places for African American people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps with boots they didn't even have. And so, even where we stand today, here in Quakertown, there were people that were African American that were moved from here to a place called Solomon Hill. And so it is. It's important to recognize the value of people who know how to do hard work. And I think about my mother living along the Mississippi, and a song comes to my mind, and I just start singing. Old Man River, that old man river. And I think about where my mother came from. And then I think about hammers. Have any of you ever thought about how powerful a hammer is? Why, it can hammer in love or take love out. That's how powerful a hammer is. And in this story, I tell the story of the legend of John Henry and the hammer. And I'd like to introduce you to his grandmother. Her name was Henrietta Lee. And she has a story to tell. Henrietta Lee. Why, Henrietta Lee lived in an old shack. She lived with her daughter, her beautiful daughter, her smart, beautiful daughter. And her name was Liza Jane. And Henrietta Lee was sitting on the porch just rocking back and forth, and she was thinking about her life and the daughter she had and the grandchild that was about to be born. And so there she was a-rocking, and she had planted sweet peas and collard greens. And I don't know if any of you know about gardening, but sweet peas and collard greens and sweet potatoes. As a matter of fact, she had gathered those sweet potatoes and she had made the most delicious sweet potato pies, and she was going to share them with the preacher and the church. And I tell you what, she was waiting for the birth of her child. Well, she was sitting on the porch and just noticing the land. The sky was bright and brilliant in the day. The sun was hanging there just like a lantern in the sky. And as she looked up, she saw the birds flittering and fluttering, and she could hear them chirping. She could also hear the crickets and the murmuring stream gurgling by. It was a beautiful day for her grandchild to be born. But right after midnight, she heard her daughter, Liza Jane, holler out, "Oh! It's coming!" I tell you, Henrietta Lee got up, and being the midwife that she was, she went inside and helped. I helped my daughter for 28 hours working to get that child into this world. I thought that that child would be a pretty little girl. But oh my, after 28 hours, I heard a crack in the sky, and I began to think, it's time. I ran to the window, I looked outside, and just then I saw lightning and a hammer in the sky. It said John Henry. I ran back to Liza Jane and I looked down, and why, that baby was sitting right there on the edge of the bed. I looked at that child and I said, Lord, this child done been born with a hammer in his hand. And he was 11 pounds, 7 ounces, and 24 inches long. John Henry was sitting there just rocking and smiling. I picked him up and I sat him to his mama's bosom, and he nursed all the milk right out of him. I said by the time that child was 2, we had to have him go milk old Mary and the cow himself. He went out and milked the cow, came back with 2 gallons, and did he have an appetite? While my grandson, he would sit there at the table and he had 16 flapjacks, 18 eggs. He ate a whole pot of grits. Do you know about grits? He ate a whole pot of grits. Then he ate a side of bacon. And on top of it all, he had himself as much of that Hoppin' John as his stomach could fill. He ate and he ate and he ate. His mama looked at him sideways, and so did his daddy. And by the time he was 7, I had to put that little old boy to work. I said, you better get on out there and work with your daddy. So he went on out there in the field and he began to split wood. Now, when he split that wood, he could split wood faster than his own daddy. And he looked at that wood and went to chopping and chopping, and fly, wood chips fly, and chopping and chopping, and fly, wood chips fly. He was done in 5 minutes, sitting back on the porch. I was sitting there looking at him. He sat down, took a blade of grass, was chewing on it, and ate 12 ears of corn right there. I said, John Henry, you know you a mess. His mama said, I don't know. Some folks say he's crazy. No, John Henry ain't crazy. He's just hungry, that's all. Well, John Henry grew and grew and grew, and by the time John Henry was 16 years old, he was 7 feet tall, 3 inches, and 285 pounds. Now, what you gonna do with a boy like that? Well, you thought he could eat as a child. He tripled his appetite. So I said, Liza Jane, we're gonna have to send that boy in the world to make a living. He can't stay here. No, no. So I packed him a knapsack full of delicious food, including hardtack and delicious food from his grandmother, and sent him into the world. He waved goodbye and headed on, and you know where he found his first job? Well, he found his first job right there on the Mississippi. He found a job on the riverboat, and as he was working, he became friendly with all the people on the crew. Then a rod went through the boat, broke bottom, and the boat began to sink. John Henry jumped up and plugged it with one hand and saved the captain, the crew, and everyone on that boat. Everyone was so amazed and called him a hero. John Henry, John Henry, John Henry. Well, he got bored with that job and decided he would take a little old walk, and he began walking. And sometimes he'd ride on a buckboard and be pulled by mules. He made his way to the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, where he heard that there were jobs. And when he got there, he looked up and he said, "This is the place for me." Oh my. Well, he said to the boss man, "I need myself a job right here at the C&O Railway." And the boss man named Mr. Smitty said, "There's no jobs for this, you, John Henry." He said, "But I need a job and I need a wife." "You need a job and you need a wife? Well, you think you're going to get both here?" "Why, sure I am," he said. He proved that he was the best worker. He got hired. And when a slimy Sam came along with a steam drill saying it could work faster than 20 men, John Henry said, "I beg to differ." John Henry said, "I can drive steel." And so he got a shaker and he began to drive that steel. He challenged the steam drill to a contest. And all the people, they were looking forward to the work that he would do. Well, that night before the contest, he and his wife looked each other in the eyes, and she said, "Sing to me, John Henry. Sing some of them old songs that we love to sing." And he began to sing. "Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I wants to go over into campground." Sing it, Polly. "Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I wants to go over into campground." Hey, Liza Jane, did you know there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza? There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. John Henry, with what shall I fix it? Dear Henry, with what shall I fix it, dear Henry, the hole? The next morning, the contest was on. I tell you what, on the right was the steam drill, and on the left was John Henry. He picked up 2 hammers. They were 20 pounds each. And as the race began, he began to drive steel faster than any man. He drove that steel, and he was driving, and he was driving, and he was driving that steel until he was exhausted. And I tell you, that day, pretty Polly, his wife, mopped his brow and helped him with a cool drink of water. And that day, they measured the hole. The steam drill had gone 9 feet, but John Henry had made 15 feet. And all the people yelled, "John Henry, John Henry, John Henry!" But he collapsed there in the arms of his wife, beautiful, intelligent Polly. His eyes closed as he looked at all the workers that would keep their jobs, as man has to match power with machines. And they say that if you listen to a railroad with wheels on tracks at night, you can hear it. And they'll go clickety-clack, 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 clickety-clack. And you might just hear him say, "John Henry, John Henry, John Henry, John Henry, John Henry, John Henry." Can you say it with me? John Henry, John Henry, John Henry. And they looked down at the tombstone and were able to say, "John Henry, here lies a steel driving man."